Before we get to this episode of the NAFI More Right Rudder podcast, I'd like to take a moment to thank this episode's sponsor, Lightspeed. Now, Lightspeed is offering a unique program with enhanced purchasing options solely to benefit you, the NAFI members. Take advantage of two cost savings options from Lightspeed, the Trade Up program and the CFI Pro Pilot program. Get up to $600 off of one of their superior A&R headsets. Their special offer will allow NAFI CFIs to combine these unique programs into one opportunity for cost savings never offered before. To learn more, visit their site at go.lightspeedaviation.com/NAFI. Once again, that's go.lightspeedaviation.com/NAFI. You can also find this link in the show notes for this podcast. Or you can even contact them directly to take advantage of their NAFI membership benefit. Call 1-800-332-2421 or email them at support@lightspeedaviation.com. We thank them for their support of this podcast and, of course, this episode. And if you're not a NAFI member and this has intrigued you, remember, you can get a $10 off discount your NAFI membership or renewal using the code POD49, POD49 on checkout. We appreciate you listening to this episode, and if you haven't liked and subscribed to this podcast in anywhere you typically listen to them, please do. And remember, our website is nafinet.org. Thanks again for listening.
Welcome to NAFI's More Right Rudder podcast. I'm Beth Stanton, Director of Publications and Editor for NAFI. This is The Writers Behind the Stories, a bi-monthly series where we get to meet some of the authors who write for NAFI's Mentor magazine. Today's guest is John Niehaus, NAFI's outgoing Director of Program Development. John holds degrees in Aviation Flight Science and Aviation Administration. He is an ATP and CFII and is taught in both Part 61 and Part 141 programs. John works for a Fortune 500 corporate flight department, flying Falcon and Gulfstream jets internationally. John has been with NAFI since 2010 and has created and expedited multiple NAFI programs, including NAFI NOTAM's blog, 10 Questions Challenge, NAFI Briefing Room video series, and the More Right Rudder podcast. Yay. John, along with other NAFI colleagues, created the Professional Development Center at EAA AirVenture, the Professional Development Program, and the monthly Mentor live streaming broadcast. This series is normally where we meet authors of Mentor, but John has done so much more. And we're going to talk about that in this very special 100th episode of the More Right Rudder podcast. So John, creator of this podcast, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's crazy to me that we've finally hit 100 episodes. It's something we started during COVID, and we weren't sure if it was going to continue, if it was going to be even listened to by anybody but me. I'm glad that things have continued, and we were I think number 1 or number 2 podcast in Norway, I think, for once. It was like our claim to fame is that we were like the number 1 aviation podcast in one of the Scandinavian countries for about a week. So that was fun.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And I always say, like, yeah, I'm big in Japan. Apparently, More Right Rudder is big in Norway. Well, this is kind of a meta episode, you guys, because John is the creator of this podcast. I'm a host for the series on the podcast. Normally, this podcast we talk to mentor authors, which John is a mentor author, but today we're going to do something a little bit different because I like to mix it up a little bit. This the topics I'd like to cover, and by the way, sometimes I do a little pre-game gaming with guests, and I did not do this for John specifically because I want to get his unvarnished, unprepared responses.
Most of the things I
This
do is unprepared.
So we're right in your wheelhouse. Um, I'd like to talk on this episode about creativity and collaboration. And when authors write an article for Mentor, obviously writing is a creative act. And over your 14 years now at NAFI, John, you've done
Hmm.
a heck of a lot of creating of content, not just content for Mentor Magazine, but all the things that you do for NAFI involve creativity and creating content. And it's also a collaborative effort. So I have lots of C's here. Creating creativity and collaboration. Maybe that can be the title of this. Okay, write that down. Because by the way, John produces he produces the podcast episode. So that can be the title, John, if you'd
I just
like.
have to make myself look good.
So none of this happens in a vacuum. And one of the things I'd like to point out to everybody is that, when we see something, like, say, for example, the latest issue of Mentor Magazine, we get this and it comes in our mailbox and we read it and we're like, oh, well, of course. Well, of course this exists. Of course this is a thing in the world. Well, this didn't exist a couple of months ago. And all the content that is in here did not exist a few months ago or years ago. And, sometimes we can just take for granted, like when I came on board a couple years ago with NAFI, it had all of these programs, had this podcast, had this live stream webcast, webinar thing, Mentor Live, all this stuff. And, I just assume, well, this is what NAFI does. Well, at one point, none of this stuff existed. And John, what I've learned over the last few months and years is that you were very instrumental in creating this content. So I'd like to talk a little bit about because I'm very fascinated about how people come up with ideas and then how the ideas are implemented. And then to what we just spoke about of the success of these ideas. 100 podcast episodes, that's a big deal. So many podcasts don't get past like 10 episodes, let alone have more than like your grandmother watching them. Um, and then, at our NAFI annual meeting open house that we had the other night, Erin Dabney, who is currently helping facilitate the Mentor Lives, talked about, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but something like 250,000 views of this material. And I might be slightly wrong with that number, but it's a big number. That didn't exist not that long ago. So like this information that we put out in the world, this podcast that you are listening to right now included, it requires somebody to think of the idea to have this thing happen. So one of the quotes that John, okay, and also John, this is like the longest goodbye of someone leaving an organization and then you still stick
I
around.
I keep trying to leave, and it's kind of like those cartoon episodes where somebody has the shepherd's hook and grabs you by the neck and pulls you right back in. I think originally my last day was supposed to be the end of April. It is now the end of May, and there's talk of the possibility the end of June. So
So we're recording this towards the end of May, and John is going to upload this in some time in June. But I think so. So John gave his little farewell in the May June issue of Mentor. We also announced it in e-Mentor. I don't know, God, like a month ago. So if you guys are like, why is this guy still around, and why are we still talking to him? I also want to just point this out to everybody because it just goes to show John's commitment and dedication. This isn't just a job for John. Like these programs are his babies, and he wants to make sure that he hands them off in a way that's going to allow them to continue with integrity. So in that farewell missive that John had in the last Mentor, he said this quote, and I'd like to read it to you. He said, "In my role as program coordinator and director, there was never an idea I pitched to Robert Mader that he shot down. He would give guidance, but let me try new things. Fail or succeed, we learned more of what our members wanted."
hmm.
So, John, I'd like to just open up and let you have the mic finally. Talking a little bit about, and there was never an idea I pitched that got shot down. How did you even come up with these ideas to begin with? And then talk a little bit about the process at NAFI that allowed you to bring these little baby ideas and birth them out into the world in the manner that they are today.
Well, first and foremost, thanks for having me on this edition. It's kind of cool to be on this side of things. So, and you're right. It's been kind of a long goodbye, but it's a good one. And as far as the podcast is concerned, um, that might have me stick around a little bit longer. 100 episodes, I think they say less than 3% of podcasts make it past 100 episodes. And, we hope to have a handoff at some point, but if that doesn't happen immediately, we all feel strongly that this podcast will continue. So, that's really important. In terms of the ideas and stuff, growing up, I was one of the kids in class that, when we were assigned some kind of project, I kind of enjoyed it. I wasn't much of a, oh, do your math homework kind of kid, but I was do a diorama, do a project of some kind, figure out what to do and how to do it. I always kind of found that fun. And in relation to NAFI, it's kind of taken that just to the nth degree. When I first started, really we had mentor and e-mentor, we had the master program, and that was about it. And so, that's not to criticize what came before, but what it does do is it really kind of opened up the sandbox for me. We were trying to figure out what kind of value we could generate for members, and not just the existing programs, but creating new things to increase that value, but also increase membership in general, make people want to join NAFI above the same reasons why we feel so strongly about it ourselves. And it just allowed itself for us to go in whatever direction we wanted to go. And I don't know if it was desperation or if it was a certain level of trust or a combination thereof. Bob just kind of said, "Well, what do you think?" And so I started coming up with different things, and we just kind of ran with them. The fun thing is that so many of these things, yeah, I've had a part of. But I can't take the credit for it. It was a team effort in so many cases. For the professional development program, we had a committee of, I think, 10 or 12 people total, that we all together put it into existence. Mentor Live wasn't my idea, but I did help in the actual development of it. That was something that, together with John Typin and Loretta Godby and some others, we all collectively put it together. So, I've been able to create things, but I've also had a really good think tank of people who knew how to do stuff. And so, Mentor Live, for example, it was a program that the initial idea was pitched to us and we just sort of made it out of clay and made it a little bit better.
Who pitched the idea to you?
Actually, I think Mentor Live was John Typin's idea.
Okay.
And Loretta and I, and Rick Todd, our former president, I think the three of us really jumped on it, and of course Bob Mader was there. So it's fun to see how individual ideas can be spun into something that lasts longer than all of us, hopefully.
Well, and so thank you so much for sharing that. I learned this story that you just recapped for us right now. You wrote a version of that in your article that you had in Mentor, and I didn't know a lot of those things. So I wanted to just sort of touch on that because I'm for the one or two NAFI members who hasn't read the entire magazine cover to cover. I just thought I'd kind of give a little recap. But I have two cliches, the um popular sayings that as you were talking. One was necessity is the mother of invention, and
Truth.
the other one is it takes a village. So you were like, okay, we had e-mentor, we had mentor. And we had the Master Flight Instructor program. What else can we offer our members? There is a necessity to create more value and educational content for NAFI members.
Hmm.
So necessity was the mother of invention there. And then the it takes a village part is that no no great ideas, they just don't poof into existence by one person, except maybe Mozart. Okay. But it takes a village. So I would really like to talk about the collaborative effort that it takes to bring things into the world, and how that kind of morphs and changes, because I think that's kind of interesting. So tell us, is there any, maybe pick a program, any program, like I said, we have the NOTAMs blog, the 10-question challenge, the NAFI briefing room, and some of the ones we still have, and some of the ones that, they kind of run their course and we go on to another thing.
Hmm.
So tell us a little bit about, think of some that pop out in your mind, and talk to us a little bit about the iterative and collaborative process in creating these programs.
Well, I mean, so for example, we've got like our special interest groups. That was the original idea of one of our members, Ned Parks. Now, Ned comes from honestly, I'm not entirely certain what he does. So, Ned, if you're listening, I could use an explanation, but I know he's in tech and he does some really important things. And he came to me one morning and said, "Hey, I do this in my other life, and I really think that there's value in how we do it with my other job. Aviation doesn't have anything like this. What do you think?" And him and I spent, gosh, maybe an hour and a half on the phone, just kind of talking about sort of what it is that he was trying to tell me, and how it could apply to NAFI members and what kind of value and all of that stuff. And this is one of those ideas. I pitched it to Bob and said, "Hey, what do you think?" The best ideas are the ones that don't really cost us anything. And that's part of the reason I think why Bob has given me such a long leash, because if I could come up with a way where it was relatively inexpensive or sometimes free to us, well, that's the best kind of value there is. And so with special interest groups, we as NAFI, we kind of administer the program. We help people set it up. We do all of the marketing for it and we encourage it. But the members are the ones that sort of turn it into their own thing and they host it. So we'll have, a member who volunteers to host that program. And I think an association like ours, we're truly blessed in the sense that never underestimate the power of a good volunteer,
Mm.
because I think our volunteers are kind of the best in the business. I mean, look at what you've been able to do with Mentor. I mean, so many people we can twist their arms into, "Hey, you wrote this article or you've got this idea. Why don't you write this article? Why don't you host this special interest group?" And it all kind of snowballs from there. So, I really like that. Just because not every one of these things has been my idea, I have been able to help implement them when a good idea comes across my desk. And that's been a lot of fun, and it gets members involved. I mean, the coolest thing that I think of is how these programs have brought this organization together. So let's look at Aaron Dabney. You mentioned him a little bit earlier. So Aaron Dabney, when I first started at NAFI, he was applying for his first master CFI. And God, I don't know how many he's done now. He's probably 5 or 6 at this point. And so he started out as a master. And him and I, like so often happens, we were chatting about, here's how you do it, here's how you fill it out, because it's got some gotchas and it's a little complicated. He came back for his second one. He came back for his third one. Somewhere in there, I said, "Hey, you seem to know this really well. Why don't you be a master reviewer?" Because we sort of have independent reviewers. "Oh, sure." So he did that. Well, guess what? Now he's a board member. And then he's volunteering for Mentor Live. George Allen, another one of our board members. He volunteered to do a briefing room episode. And for those that don't know, we were doing these through COVID. We were doing these YouTube specials, which briefing room and 10 questions sort of were the precursor to the podcast, which is why some of those have been phased out. Well, what we would do is we would say, okay, let's do an episode of whatever content. In this case, it was sport pilot instruction. I would go to our social media channels, specifically our Facebook group, and say, hey, I need 3 instructors who have experience in this to volunteer, and let's chat for about an hour. George raised his hand, said, I'm not a NAFI member, but I do have sport pilot instruction background. I'll do it. I said, okay. So I comped him a membership just so that he understood what he was getting into. And he volunteered. We did the episode. And lo and behold, 2 years later, he's a board member. These things happen organically, but it truly is crazy that it inspires people to volunteer and participate and get involved and frankly it creates these friendships, and that's probably the thing that I'll miss most of being in this role. I don't know if that
Well,
answers your question or not.
it does. Thank you, John. Um, a couple of things as you were talking struck me. Um, the first one was saying yes. Saying yes. Like when somebody asks you something, if it feels right, you say yes.
Hmm.
And part of that saying yes is stepping up. So, for example, Aaron Dabney decided to apply for his master CFI. He did it a few times, and you asked him if he'd be a reviewer. He said yes. So I really think there's magic when you decide to when you start putting yourself out there.
Hmm.
And he put himself out there to say, "Hey, I want to get my master flight instructor." Um, he put himself out there. When you put yourself out there, you put yourself in view of the universe to see you. And then
Oh
if
yeah.
the universe says, "Oh, hello," and taps on your shoulder and sort of pulls you like, "Hey, over here." When you're asked the question, you have the opportunity to say yes or no. And if it's something you really want to do and it kind of sparks your interest or your joy and your ooh, like I always say, it's sort of kind of you get that impulse, it gives you a little tug. Like even if you don't know how to freaking do it, like
Hmm.
you're like, yeah, okay, let me. So there's an element of stepping up, and I'm gonna sort of circle this back around to, as I always do on this podcast, you guys, people who might want to write an article for Mentor Magazine. Again, if I'm we constantly beat that drum, and it's sort of like, yeah, I have this thing to say, and you get to decide, do you want to step up, do you want to say yes? I'd also like to speak of the iterative process that happens, and John just alluded to it when he said, we did the 10 question challenge, and we did the briefing room and how that evolved into this podcast. And by the way, I approached John, I don't know, at some point a year plus ago, and I'm like, "Hey John, I want to do a series on the podcast." And guess what John said? Yes. And so that's why we're here talking right now, because of this iterative process. If this podcast hadn't been created, we wouldn't be sitting here having this series on it. Um, I want to just bring up a recent experience I had. I do some freelance writing work in the aviation universe, and I recently had the pleasure to interview some folks from the Savannah Bananas. Now, I
Oh,
don't know, I've been living under a rock apparently for years. I didn't know who they were. And for any other rock dwellers like myself, the Savannah Bananas they're kind of like the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball, where they have this entertainment and fun and all of this like exciting stuff. So it's like baseball, but a performance at the same time. It's super enthusiastic and a lot of fun. Obviously, John knew who they were because his
hmm.
eyes lit up and went, "Oh, wow." So I spoke with their director of entertainment, and he talked about how they have a group called the OTT group, which stands for over the top. And it's a small group of about 5 people, and they just throw ideas like every game they have, they try to implement like 15 to 25 new things into which is a lot of ideas. And so some of the ideas are great, some of them bomb, but there's this culture of creativity, of trying new things. Yeah, sometimes they fail. Sometimes you need to tweak them a little bit. But I really was so impressed with that, and it is collaborative effort. And Zach Frangillo, he's the gentleman I spoke with. He's like, I can't even say like if it was my idea when it actually comes out. He goes, because it's changed so much.
Hmm.
Like I might have had the idea, and then Kara said this, and then Jesse said this, and so then you have this thing, and like, where did it come from? And so I think a lot of the stuff, I'm circle back to NAFI now, a lot of the stuff that we do is kind of like that. It's like someone has an idea and then someone runs with the idea and then it gets this way. And so I just find the collaborative, iterative process of creativity really, really interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, and COVID was devastating for a lot of people. And it was a very interesting time for us as well. We've always been kind of a virtual organization anyways. So the fact that people weren't necessarily getting together, and, going to trade shows and going to various things didn't affect us that much. But what it did do is it drove the digital culture. It drove everyone, us included, to go, well, what can we do to communicate better with members? What kind of content can we distribute digitally? Because everyone's craving it right now. People can't go outside, they can't go do these things. So this is an opportunity for us to grow kind of in the virtual space. And talk about evolving. So we had a meeting shortly after people, like, everything started kind of locking down, and Mentor Live was already going, and we were going, well, what if we do something else? What if we do something that's like pre-recorded? Uh, and the original name, and I'm not even kidding about this. The In the meeting, the one of the things that came up with was Aero Brief. Now, if that gives you the idea of boxer shorts with the NAFI logo flying on a flagpole, that was the that was
I
the
have it
image that
now.
I got
I
when
have
I
that
heard
image
Aero
now.
Brief.
Thanks, John.
Right. And so, like, I thought it was great. It wasn't, I can't take credit for that name, but
By
I
the
thought
way,
it
I
was
think we need
hilarious.
to have nappy boxers
I
available on
thought
our
about it.
website. Yeah,
I
we
thought about
totally
it.
need that. Totally.
Um, but that was, like you said, the sort of iterative process that then turned itself into Briefing Room, which then turned itself into the podcast. So, like, that was the actual step one, and this is actually the step three. So again, it's that process of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And one of the rules that I had, and I didn't even know it for the longest time, but if you try to be perfect, if you try to go, okay, here's this thing, I don't know how to do this thing, but before I do the thing, I'm going to learn how to do it. That's great. It really is. If you can perfect it before you put it out, more power to you. But what I've found is that 98% of the things you try to perfect before you put out never go anywhere. And so, I've been able to learn on the go. I didn't know how to video edit. I didn't know how to audio edit. I didn't know how to do any of these things. Some of them I do better than others. But we've been able to start these things and just run with them and then learn how to do it as we go. And all of those things can continue to improve, but at least we tried. At least we put it out there. And again, that's going back to Paul and Bob, Chair Emeritus Paul Predecker, our current president, and our current chair Karen. That's the types of ways that we've allowed ourselves to evolve. And it may not be great right at first. It may not be perfect. People may go, boy, that was a bit rough. But you look at Mentor Live, they just hit 80 episodes, and that production just keeps getting better. If we had waited for it to be 80 episodes good, we would have never done it.
I love it. Oh my God, John, you just like said so many awesome things. So I want to just so a few things I want to just sort of highlight that you just said. Gonna gonna take a little highlighter, John. Gonna highlight a few things. Um Perfectionism and procrastination. And
Yes.
Bob Mader and I, we had a one of these episodes. He was on the Writers Behind the Series podcast episode a few back. It was a great conversation I had with Bob, and we talked about this. We talked about perfectionism, how you can get paralyzed. I had a writing mentor um, who she had a program just called Get It Done, and there's also you guys might have heard of you. She used to say get a C, but get a C, Beth, because you know what a C means. A C means you completed the assignment satisfactorily, because us little type A overachievers want to have everything perfect before we put it out. And if we wait for things to be perfect, guess what? Nothing's ever perfect. It'll never get out. And I also
Mhm.
think of that saying, C's get degrees, right? So you just like you do the work. And that's not to say you don't aspire to an A plus or an A or even a B minus. I don't know. There's also the concept of ready, fire, aim, right? Like we tend to think we need to hit the target on the first shot. Well, of course you're not going to hit the target on the first shot. You have to practice. So, it's like you course correct. You're heading for, heading 364 and you want to get to 365, you just course correct a little bit. And you get that by doing, you learn by doing. And I think part of since we're talking about creativity here, one of, I think, the biggest myths about creating anything is that you know it before you do it. You don't know it before you do it. You learn, it is on the job training. You
Mhm.
learn, I started a podcast a couple years ago and I knew nothing, like you just said, I knew nothing about editing. I learned it when I did it. And guess what? The more I did it, the better I got. And
Mhm.
think of all of you guys out there who are flight instructors. Think of your first few students that you taught and
Oh
think
yeah.
of how you teach now. Well, you learn. I was just taught, I think it was Aaron. He's like, he goes, my first few students, he goes, I wish I could get him back. And like, I shouldn't say this is Aaron because I'm not sure. So I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but it was like, I want to refund them their money. You know what I mean? Just because like when you first started out, you didn't know what you know now, but that's okay. And the people that you worked with and, it's kind of cool. Like think of a music band that you like or a writer that you follow. You see the evolution of their work. People don't stay the same throughout their career, no matter what it is. Like people change and they change their style, and they change like what they're passionate about, and it reflects in their work. So I think like this idea that we come out of the box perfect and everything with a little bow tied neatly, that's just a myth. And so I totally appreciate the fact, John, and commend that it's kind of ballsy. It takes a lot of sort of courage and faith to jump into the deep end of the pool and do it.
I appreciate that, and I guess there's sort of 2 points to that, and you also learn this as you go, and that's you can get away with it, but you can only get away with it every so often, and it has to be directed. If you throw caution into the wind and just do everything that you think, people start to go, why are none of these things polished? If you only see it every so often, then you don't notice how rough it could be. But if you throw out three things all at the same time that aren't sure about, then all of a sudden people start to notice. So there is a method to the madness when it comes to, figuring out how often you can do these things. Um, and it, it's very easy in the space that we operate in, because this association is full of some really great people. It always has been. Somehow we are so lucky to attract people because we're always seeing people leave, but new people coming in. and the attitude seems to stay the same. Our members are very tolerant of rough ideas. They're very tolerant of mistakes. And I've always appreciated that because at first, when I first started, it was, oh my God, if this isn't right, what are they going to say? And you make a couple mistakes and you get members that will personally email you and say, hey, I know that maybe this wasn't what you wanted, but it was a good try. It's almost it's a very safe place to make mistakes, and try new things, and so you combine the members' tolerance with the sort of tolerance of the board. Eventually we get to that good place where it was like, okay, well, it's a good thing we attempted this because we came up with something better than we thought we were going to.
John, everything you're saying like is literally what you do when you teach somebody how to fly. So think about it. Like literally. Okay. So I guess I was just like, well, this is an organization of flight instructors
Oh
who
yeah.
have a student get in an airplane who have no freaking clue what they're doing, make all kinds of mistakes. And the job of the flight instructor is to calmly point out, like, okay, notice like what you're doing and maybe this could be better. And so like literally flight instructors get front row, haha, not front row, right seat row, view of the making of a new pilot, right? Like you get
Mhm.
to watch like someone from a rank newbie who doesn't know how to friggin' turn the key to like somebody who solos and then somebody who goes on to become a flight instructor themselves or a first officer or captain of an airline or fill in the blank. Like people understand you don't expect a new student to get in your plane and just do whatever, like know how to fly the plane. And I totally understand that there has to be a certain level of professionalism and doing it right. You don't want to put things out there that are garbage or but when you make a good faith effort, like a student, like you show up, I can remember showing up for a flight lesson with the best intentions and I studied and I did my work, but I still was a shit show. I mean, it happens. So,
Hmm.
but you as long as you keep showing up, as long as you keep showing up and your intentions are good and you have good mentors, you will eventually get it. And
Hmm.
so I think just we should all give ourselves some grace and some just permission to like not know how it's going to turn out, and that's where like the magic happens. And kind of as we wrap up here, John, there's a question that I've been thinking that I would like to ask you. Out of all, and I know this might be like, which is your favorite child? I think you only have one actual child, right? So,
It makes
so
it
that would
easy
be
for me.
easy. But
Yeah.
tell me, out of all of your experiences at NAFI and all the programs that you helped, some of the ideas you came up with yourself, some of the ideas you helped nurture them until their current form. Which one has sort of left the biggest impact on you, or that sort of has touched you the most?
You know, like you said, they all kind of have their certain mark that they've left. The master program being one of them. I mean, when NAFI was going through some rough times when I first started, the master program was right along with it. And we've really been able to grow that like no other, and the impact that it's had on the instructors who have been accredited from that program. I mean, that's something that's meaningful. And when you help administer something like that, um, you get to share in the meaning and the success in somebody else. I didn't do anything to get them their master. In fact, if anything, I made it difficult for them to get to get it done. But the more difficult the program, the better the success when someone gets it. And I've found great value in that. Um, the professional development program was, I think it was about a year and a half, maybe even 2 years in the making before we ever even put out a single course. Like I said, it started out as a collaborative idea between myself and Rick Todd, and I think Loretta may have been involved in that as well. I can't really remember. And originally, Rick was going to sort of do he was going to be team lead on the meetings that we were having with industry partners and volunteers. And for whatever reason, he couldn't do it. And I stepped in and, just by coincidence, I then took over the entire process and leveraging some of these amazing instructors to create a program that we really hope people have found value in, and it's continuing to grow. So that was a lot of work for all of us prior to anybody ever seeing, what this thing was. And even after we put out the first course, I think it took us another year and a half to get the 30 we needed to actually have somebody quote unquote complete the thing. So I mean, it was a darn near 6 year, let's see, 1 year and a half, another year and a half, plus a little bit of extra. I mean, we're looking at least 3 years plus just to get to a point where members could complete the program start to finish. And that was huge. And there's more to come. So those that have already completed the PDP, there's more coming. So stay tuned to that. Um, the podcast has been I had no idea that I was ever going to enjoy doing this as much as I ended up doing. It was supposed to be a repository of, going back to the whole idea of, well, the more we can do that costs the least amount of money, the better. So it was okay, not everybody can make every mentor live. We have this content. How can we reuse it? Squeeze that orange just a little bit more to get more juice. So the podcast started out as, well, we'll just take, some of the content that we've already recorded and just turn it into audio form so people can listen to it in the car. And here we are, 2 years plus later, and we're creating content exclusively for the podcast. And that's been a lot of fun. I know I didn't pick just one, but it's really been a fun time to be able to throw ideas out and see what happens.
Well, and thank you, John, for all of the work that you've done over the creative work and collaborative work you've done here at NAFI. And I just want people to take a page out of the conversation book that John and I are having here, and that you just got to get started, and you need to not worry about sucking, and you need to just get better, and you never know where it's going to end up. There, like I said, there's an inherent bravery and faith that there is in all of this, and humility too, and just like in being willing to take uh criticism, critique, feedback, however you want to uh however you want to call that, and I'm thinking of also that, saying about like an overnight success that takes 20 years to happen, like when you were talking about the professional development program, like it took years and years before the first person came through all of those. So like the fact that like you have somebody to have completed that program, well, the program had to be created, and then it
Mm-hmm.
needed to get put out in the world, and then people needed to know about it, and then they had to participate in it. So, I mean, there's just so many steps to a process to sort of circle back to like, it took a lot of things to make this happen. And then once
Mm-hmm.
it happens, it's like, okay, it's here. And then what's the next thing? So, I want to share something as we close up here, John. I want to share with you, one of our NAFI members wrote to me, and he said, I wish I could shake John Niehaus's hand and just say thanks. He should be proud of his work and accomplishments at NAFI. I'm sure he and all of you are. So for the record, John, I know you're proud of your accomplishments. We at NAFI are proud of your accomplishments. And thank you so much for everything you've done. For congratulations on this 100 episode of the
Yay.
podcast. It's so amazing that like you're on it, and we're here having this conversation. Boy, when you started it, I bet you never saw this coming.
I
Um,
didn't.
and who knows what's next. And we appreciate your service to NAFI and your continued transition with a person who is replacing you, who we're very
Hmm.
excited about as well, Sarah Stott.
Yep.
And you're not going to get rid of us. Like you said, there's friendships involved and long-term, lifelong relationships that we form in aviation and here at NAFI. So yeah, you're we couldn't get rid of you if we wanted to, and we certainly don't want to. And hopefully you'll stick around and tolerate us also, John.
I am honored to have been a part of all of this over these years. I've learned a ton. When I started, I was I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years removed from college, and still didn't know how to put my big boy pants on. And this organization has allowed me to learn all of those things. And yeah, it's been great. So as they say, it's not goodbye, it's I'll see you later.
And, talking about big boy pants, I am going to look into the boxer short briefs.
As long as you call them Aero Brief.
Well, thank you so much, John. This has been a pleasure having this conversation. And all of you out there, thank you for joining us for the Writers Behind the Stories on NAFI's More Right Writer podcast. Be sure to leave your comments and please like and subscribe and join me next time in a couple of months. And I invite you to consider sharing your stories and collaborating with us. We'll see you next time on the Writers Behind the Stories on NAFI's More Right Writer podcast.